Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Those of you that are able to join us live, welcome. Those of you that will be watching this recording that we're streaming out later, hello, it's a pleasure to meet you. And we want to go ahead and get started talking about this conversation around banking as a service, what we in this space know more traditionally as BaaS or embedded finance, embedded banking. All terms that, while nuanced, happen to pertain to the conversation we're about to have today. Now, for this conversation, I want to make certain that we understand that it's geared towards those bankers that are evaluating banking as a service, as a strategy for their organization. But that doesn't mean that individuals joining us like Jill, who we love to have, and others that are presently in the space will not benefit from the discussion. Our hope is to ensure that we all start on a level playing field and understand exactly where we are in the industry, what BaaS may be able to do for your financial institution, and then key you into the elements and the players that can help in this conversation. So without further ado, let me go ahead and get started with our next screen. We have just a panel that I'm excited to share with you today and to share this stage with. In addition to myself, hi, I'm Stacy Bishop. I live in and around fintechs and banking and frankly have my entire life. Share just a few little snippets about me before I turn things over to our other panelists shown here. So I grew up in a small little town that happened to be the headquarters for one of the big three core companies. My career path was mapped out very early in banking and incidentally in embedded banking later, as I married the gentleman shown to the right-hand side of me on the screen here, Steve Bishop, who for a period of time, can I just say, stalked me and moved over to that big core company as well before he went off into his own endeavors and found himself in embedded banking. And the last thing I'll say before I ask Steve to talk a little bit about himself is just the simple fact that when you are in a relationship with someone that lives in and around financial services, guess what? That is absolutely all you discuss. That is all your children hear you discuss. So our kids know way too much about embedded banking, way too much about net interest margin compression that's going on in the industry than any 10, 7, and 6-year-old should. But with that, Steve, because you pulled me into this space, why don't you go ahead and give us just a little bit of information about yourself?
Yeah, I am Steve Bishop. I began my career by stalking Stacy and going to Jack Henry.
I told you.
On the core side, and then went to grad school, worked for AT&T, did the big bank city thing, and then digital platform before working for a community bank, where I updated tech and built out a network and really started digging into embedded finance. And that's where made some great friends, and two of them are here today that we're going to hear from. But really excited for this educational seminar of just like, what is BaaS? How would it fit into a financial institution? I'm very passionate about this if you see me on LinkedIn, but I think this is the future of banking. And so we owe it to ourselves to stay on top of the industry trends and just make sure that we're doing the right things for our organization.
Good. Next up, one of those friends that Steve mentioned, Mr. Jeff Nowicki. Jeff, why don't you share a little bit about yourself? Mr. Banker turned fintech extraordinaire.
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'm Jeff Nowicki, Chief Banking Officer, Treasury Prime. Been with Treasury Prime for about 5 years. Before that, I was a banker. I was doing banking as a service, embedded banking before it was really coined term back in 2012, 2013 with Radius Bank before the Lending Club acquisition. Did that for many years and was lucky enough to be Treasury Prime's first client about 8-9 years ago. And so I've been building this, helping build this company, this product from day one. And it's been fun. I've had a chance meeting a lot of you, met Steve and Stacy when Steve was at OMB and was one of our clients. And it's been fun. I would like to say my 5 kids at home hear as much about the financial service space as the Bishops, but not quite.
You guys are too exhausted by the end of the day with 5. You know what I mean? Totally fair, Jeff. Totally fair. Well, thank you for that. Well, we are going to turn things over to Vinny. Hey, Vinny, would you like to go ahead and share a little bit about yourself? And Vinny, I've been working on your last name, Rezipker, Reservoir.
Yeah.
How did I do?
They're 99% there. Firstly,
Low.
just wanted to say thank you for Steve and Stacy for having Jeff and I on this webinar. Jeff, always nice to when our paths cross. And thank you to all the banks that are joining to hear us chat about embedded finance, or BaaS, however you want to call it. Something that I do truly enjoy talking about. I've been with Unit for about a little over 4 years now. I came in as the director of compliance, and I'm now the director of bank partnerships. Prior to Unit, I held a number of roles, different compliance roles at Citigroup. Steve, I wonder if you and I ever ran into each other. Citigroup, UBS, and a couple of prepaid companies. And for geographical purposes, while our offices are in Tel Aviv and New York, I am remote in Lower Merion, Pennsylvania, just outside of Philly. And really looking forward to this conversation. So thank you.
You're welcome. As long as you're a Chiefs fan, we are going to get along just fine, Vinny. Too close to Philly and those Eagles for my taste. But I digress. Why don't we keep it friendly and why don't we move along? So for those of you that are joining and you're wondering what in the world we're going to cover today, there's a lot. I do want to start with a bit of a state of the union, talking about, as an industry, where we've been and some predictions for what we're hearing about the future, before we get into the concept of why we should be paying attention to banking as a service. Frankly, there's a lot of people that can claim our traditional customers as their customers. And we're going to get into that and peel back that discussion as we move into the BaaS as a strategy. And probably what I'm looking forward to the most, I'm really going to lean into the expertise of our panelists, is in this fourth section. Steve and I have been kicking around this term that we say around the house. Again, you guys know the kind of household we have. It's a nerdy one, but we think of BaaS in terms of layers and players. And this particular session is going to kick off what we call the first layer and player series, where we're talking to enablement providers. And there's a lot of different names thrown around in the industry for companies like Treasury Prime and Unit. You might hear middleware, sidecar, subledgers, orchestration layers. For purposes of our discussion, I'm just going to group them and condense them all down to enablement providers. For joining us live, we're going to share with you all something that's been a bit of a passion project for Steve and I. Is the ambassador report. We've been around now for about 6 months. We saw this need to try to chat with more bankers and discuss with more bankers the concept of banking as a service and whether it could be a solution for their financial institution. Now, frankly, you all, I don't know if banking as a service could be a fit for your solution. What I know is that we have learned a lot over the last 6 months. We've been paying attention to a lot of signals, and I want to share those signals that we've put together for you in our inaugural BaaS, the Ambassador Report here. We are also going to chat about what we're doing next and open it up for Q&A. So let's go ahead and get started so we have time for each and every one of those. This first section is just about where we are and predictions for where we're going. Now, for those of you that are bankers joining us, you are not going to be surprised by these numbers. If you've been in the space, you know how the number of banks, and I'm speaking specifically of banks here, not credit unions, but the number of banks has steadily been declining, little bump the past few years with de novo activity. But for a point of reference, when I first started working at that large core company and held my first bank teller job in the summer of 95, there were 10,000 of us out there, 10,000 bankers. And we have now seen this steady decline for a lot of different reasons. Here's what I think is compelling about this information. Yeah, there's some right sizing in the market, but Steve and I happened to be in a room, likely perhaps with some of you, a couple of months ago at an American FinTech Council, AFC then. And there was this general discussion about how many banks there would be in the next 20 years. And I want to share those numbers with you here today. Now, you don't have to agree with these numbers. I certainly don't want to agree at all with the lowest number there. But these were the numbers being thrown around by industry experts as far as how many banks at the current rate of what we're doing as an industry we're going to see in 20 years, 2,000, 1,000. The number 17 is not a number I even want to comprehend. The diversity of our market here in the US is one of the things that makes us so striking and extraordinary and such an attractive market for fintechs. And it's one of those reasons why I would encourage you to listen quite intently to the conversation we're about to have here today. Now, I guess I do want to stop before we move on to the second session. Let me go ahead and stop this share for just a moment and ask our panelists for a second. Steve, what are your initial thoughts on just these numbers that we heard first a couple of months ago in Nashville about the number 2,000, 1,000, 17?
We've heard for years and years that banks are going to consolidate and all this consolidation. I think there's a bit of like the banks that are callous or financial institutions are a bit callous towards that. But we also see this velocity of change. The whole world is changing with AI and all these, but especially in the financial services. And so the time is ripe for that change. And I think that there will be consolidation. I don't know that it's going to go down to 17. I think it depends on the number of banks that start to be proactive and looking at where do they need to be, what is strategic. And embedded finance is not going to be the answer for everyone. You are going to need a niche play, just like you have in your local community and more than just customer service. But have that market segment that you go after. Embedded finance is absolutely something that can be one avenue or one niche. You can have that and reach beyond your brick and mortar. So I disagree that there's consolidation. It's that trend's just going to continue. How far it goes is really going to be up to the people in financial institutions today and the actions that they take. That will determine whether they're relevant around in 5 to 10 years.
I love that. And I agree. Well, I don't love the concept, but I agree with you definitely fundamentally with everything that you've just mentioned there. And I would ask Jeff and Vinny, do you have any thoughts even within the banking as a service play or other plays for ensuring that these folks joining us on the call are included in that 2,000, 1,000, that 17 number, whatever the number is going forward in 20 years? Kind of a big question.
Yeah, I think every bank, for whether how you're doing now or in the next 10, 15, 20 years, banking's changing. I mean, it was different 20 years ago, 30 years ago with the introduction of like online banking and improvements there. It's all about your distribution channels and getting to the clients where you want to attain them. And it's not always down the street anymore. And it's not always them going to your website. It's about the apps that they're got on their phone and where they're interacting and doing their other activities. And that's where you, the bankers, need to meet them. And unfortunately, it's not always going to be in your brand. You're powering it, you're behind the scenes, but you have a different distribution channel. And folks that can really make a solid business off of that are setting themselves up for a good future.
Yeah, 100%. And I think in addition to the effect that these numbers might play on the banks, the parties that really will suffer, in my opinion, are the consumers and businesses that use banking, right? I think if it gets to a number like 17, you can expect the larger banks to have their services be much more general and less catered to the specific needs of end users, whether it be consumers or small businesses. And I think the reason that we at Unit and across the industry are seeing such an uptick in fintechs and vertical SaaS companies looking to embed finance into their offerings is because they can provide the services and the care and specifically cater to the needs of their businesses. So the less banks there are, the less ability that these small businesses and consumers are going to be able to have their specific needs met, and are just going to have to take what the big banks give them. And we want to do everything we can to avoid that.
Yeah, agreed. Thinking in terms of those end customers and distributing to them in a new fashion, as both you gentlemen have mentioned, it's going to be paramount to continuing to serve those end users. Because I have a gentleman that shows up periodically on my posts that just continues to say that banks need to go away, decentralized finance, and just the newer rail systems are the answer. And Vinny, I think for the reason you've just mentioned, serving those end users, those SMB clients in their community, are just the reasons why I believe he is absolutely so wrong and so misguided. But we're going to get into all of these discussions much deeper as we continue on into these next sections. So why don't we go ahead and continue the discussion? Steve, I trust you guys can see my screen again.
Yep.
Perfect. We're going to go ahead, you guys, with this concept, and this is something you heard Jeff touch upon, the simple fact that these days our customers are everyone's customers, and we need to be focusing on the distribution. Why is that? Well, as I think back over the course of my career in banking and then working within fintechs, that large core company I mentioned, the playbook was simple. It was a rinse and repeat type of model. And what you're seeing here was that playbook. All financial services that extended to our end user, our end customers, they were offered by banks. They were offered by you. And what did we do in order to bring more customers in? Well, we partnered with fantastic, solid vendors. Companies like the one I used to work for, companies like the ones I work with today, who are knocking on your door or hitting up your email or stalking you at events, trying to sell you something. And it was a beautiful model. It was very self-fulfilling in that fashion because customers signed on to our digital banking experiences. And that's why we started hearing these terms of digital transformation, these buzzwords about a decade ago. And candidly, I'm really ready for those two words to go away because I don't think they are the model moving forward for how you as an institution will be successful. When you look at this current and traditional banking playbook, and we add in other elements that as bankers we're paying attention to, this concept of we have to be the primary depository financial institution. Everyone's vying for that PDFI status. We're all worried about the compression around our net interest margins and how do we combat that? How do we find relief? Is it by offering a new and exciting product to bring in more deposit figures? Do we need to tweak our rates on the deposit or the lending side? These conversations that we have traditionally had and traditionally worried about are there, coupled along with new challenges. And we've heard a ton of research over the course of this past year about the sheer volume of money, or the sheer count, if you will, that amount that's going to be handed down over the next 20 years in what we as an industry are calling the great generational wealth transfer. And I've heard figures from 72.5 trillion up to 108 trillion. That's potentially up for grabs. And if your institution is trying to use those traditional playbooks to go after all of that, you may find that you're not getting your big piece of the pie as you might hope, and that you might have to look at other alternatives to compete. And I say this, just generally with love and because I want this industry to thrive. We've all heard these other statistics as well. 50% of Americans have relationships with multiple banks, or to say it another way, they cheat on their bank. And that's nothing that's new to us. I think we all know this. We don't like to think about it, but that is just the way it is. Another fact is what I hear in conversations with bankers, that the average age of their depositors, it's getting up there. It's aging. Now, these numbers seem much younger to me than they once did in my life, but the average account holder between 50 and 62 years of age in most institutions. We just talked about that great generational wealth transfer. So everyone's focused on, oh my goodness, how do we keep our customers doing more with us? How do we continue to attract younger depositors? And how do we stop the leakage of our deposits out to other institutions? What I want to challenge you